Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Leadership and management and learning and things like that are all things that are of great interest to me, as many of my listeners will know. And so I wanted to reach out to Dr. Candice Chow, who is a professor at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University. And she's got really quite a fascinating background that we're going to hear a little bit about. And what she talks about is that she wants to change the business management paradigm. She's a strategic advisor, a thought leader, an educator, and a researcher. And she focuses in on not only leadership, but value-based leadership. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So Dr. Chow, Candice, how are you?
Very good. How are you, Brian?
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you so much for joining us. Maybe just to start off with, tell us all a little bit about your career, where you've come from, where you are today, and what sort of interested you so far.
Yeah, it's going to be a long story. I hope your show is long enough for me to tell my story.
Please.
So, okay. So I wasn't actually from Canada. So I was born in Hong Kong, but I was fortunate to be educated in England. And so I was sent over to England at a very young age to study in England. And then I continued my education, and I did my undergrad in London, Imperial College London. I did my mechanical engineering there. It was fascinating why I actually ended up engineering. It wasn't because I love engineering. It's always felt that there's a bit of social pressure to pursue a career where you can actually make money, right? But my interest actually, I found out my interest lies somewhere else. So when I was at university, I focused not on my academic endeavor, but I focused a lot of my energy on performing arts, public speaking, organizing clubs and all those social activities. So I got kind of very interested in people and relationships.
Sorry. So you were an engineer that was focused on the performing arts and people?
Yes, I actually just barely managed to finish my degree. So I finished with honors, but I spent a lot of my extracurricular activity times doing everything else other than trying to practice my engineering prowess. You know what I mean. So so I really enjoy working with people, and I found out during my undergrads. And so when I finished undergrad, I decided to go back home, which is Hong Kong, and I actually did some soul searching in the sense that where did I really want to end up? What actually excited me? I looked at, working in factories and whatnot. That wasn't very exciting. So I ended up in the hotel management business. So I actually joined an international hotel firm in Hong Kong. Tourism and hospitality was a blooming industry back in the days. And that was in the 90s. And I joined the hotel industry for 5 years. And it was a fascinating industry, got to travel a bit, and I got to be assigned to work overseas. So I actually was one of the youngest female manager to open a hotel for this international hotel chain in the Philippines. And so I worked there for about just under 2 years. And then I decided it was enough. It was fun. I got to meet a lot of people, but it was exhausting. It was very exhausting. It's 24/7. And so I decided to come to Canada and do my master MBA. That was also the time when my parents decided it was a good time to emigrate. So they also moved, and they moved to Vancouver just before I did. They stayed there for a bit, and I decided to join them. And I went to did my MBA with Ivy at Ivy Business School.
And what did you focus on at Ivy?
General management. So I didn't really pick a specialty. A lot of people pick finance or marketing. I always want to do consulting or strategy. So I decided to focus on general management and / strategy. So after that, that is where I landed in strategy. When I was doing my hotel management, I always wanted to do MBA anyways. That was kind of in my career plan. And I always fascinated in terms of wanted to run my own company one day. Still hasn't happened, unfortunately. But I always want to get my hands, dirty in terms of planning and figuring out what's the best way to move a business forward. So MBA was always in my plan, and so I went to Ivy, and then after that I met my husband at Ivy, And so I ended up here in Toronto while my parents were still in Vancouver. And that is where I started
doing after Ivy.
So I started to pursue strategy work. So I knew that's where I wanted to do. So I ended up in telecommunications. So I worked for a company back then called AT&T Canada. It's no longer exist. And I worked for them for probably just under 2 years. And then I got headhunted to Purelator, where I had the strategy until 2016. So I actually worked for Purelator for a long time and in the strategy function throughout my career there. And that is where I continue to hone and develop my strategic planning and strategy development skills. And then
decided to do a doctorate.
Okay, so that's where that's where it started. As while I was working, I started to wonder what is actually the purpose of business. So as I was working with C-suite executives, I was talking to them and reflecting on what is the business we are in? What is it that we're trying to make an impact on beyond satisfying the bottom line and profits? That is, then I decided that perhaps there is something more that I need to learn that I haven't quite got. And so I decided to do my MBA part-time when I was at Purelator, and they were very great to me, generous with me. So they actually supported my part-time doctorate endeavor. So I did my doctorate at Henley Business School, where I also had the opportunity to do courses here at Rotman in Toronto as well. So it's quite a convenient option as well.
And the doctorate, the DBA, was in what?
It's actually my research focus on strategic leadership and values and how that impact corporate responsibility practice. So I want to understand how leaders actually, what's the leader's role in driving decisions in organizations? Why do we see certain companies are more benevolent, and why are some companies more, cutthroat in a sense, more competitive, more bottom line driven? And so that's where my research is: strategic leadership and the influence on corporate responsibility practice.
Unbelievable! What a fascinating background. So, just out of interest, I went to Ivy for my undergraduate and business degree, and then I went into hotel restaurant management with Laventhal and Horwath. I was a consultant in hotel and restaurants, so I similarly background to you.
Nice.
I decided that wasn't for me and went back and did my MBA. And like you, I did an MBA, and then I went into industry. And a couple of years ago, I started doing my part-time doctorate in business, my DBA, not at Henley and Rotman, but at something called the International School of Management in Paris. And while I'd always been, you were the engineer in the background, in your background, I was always the finance guy. I decided similarly that it was about people and about leadership and about social capital. And so my doctorate is specializing in entrepreneurship, economic development, and social capital. So we've got some similarities in our journeys.
That's indeed. So what are some of the insights that you can I ask you questions? If I can.
Sure, but we've got to take a break for a message first of all. So we're going to come back with Dr. Candice Chow in just a minute. Stay with us for some messages. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting today with Dr. Candice Chow, who is a professor at the DeGroote School of Business at University of McMaster University in Burlington and Hamilton. And she's got an interesting background that's got some similarities to mine in that she's got an undergraduate in engineering. Mine was in finance. Then she went into hotel management. I was a hotel consultant. Then she did an MBA. I did an MBA. Then she worked in industry. I worked in industry. And then she's doing and completed a part-time doctorate where she changed her focus to be about people and leadership. And I'm doing a part-time doctorate, not quite finished, where I'm similarly focused on people and social capital. So my gosh, what a fascinating trajectory the two of us are on. But you've done it far faster and far more successfully than mine. So Dr. Chow, you said that you were interested in value-based management. Tell me, what is value-based management?
So traditional management theories that we have been taught, through MBA schools and whatnot, it's very economic based. It's very rational. Everything is very calculated. What is the business case for this investment? What is this business case for the decision? And we tend to shy away from talking about human values. So every leaders bring to their work, whether they consciously know it or not, is what is important to them. And sometimes people will put aside some of those things that is important to them, for example, like family, friendship, relationship. And you see a lot of people sometimes forgot that those things are actually important to them as they work and when they go into the workplace, they park those values aside. But those values are always there. And without those values being in the conversations, we have started to see, and now we know, sometimes business decisions tend to compromise on a lot of things that humans actually really treasure in life. Sometimes it's about caring. Kindness, for example, has been seen as a weakness in the workplace in the past. And I think times have changed. Kindness, for example, right? You got to be, cutthroat. You're not going to be assertive. You've got to be aggressive. And you need to be competitive. But there is no place, for example, for kindness, for example, at work. Sometimes it's seen to be a weakness in certain types of organizational culture, especially one that is kind of surround around kind of up or out, get the kind of philosophy. And I feel that, is it the way forward? A question: is it the way forward? What do you think? What do I think?
Yeah.
And I think it is not necessarily the way forward. And I say that is because at the end of the day, humans thrive on some fundamental universal values that has been with us till today. And without
so then, if that's true, how come we associate so many business leaders as people that unkind may not be the right description, but as assertive and authoritarian and as take charge, etc.? Why is that?
I think the education system have been giving us the messages that perhaps the way to progress or the way to climb the ladder is to be aggressive, is to be authoritarian. We have this notion that we are looking for heroes to lead us, and heroes have a lot of strength, very masculine type of characteristics in them. And that is how our culture has been kind of slowly in the past telling us that is the way that it should work. But I think the tide has changed, and then we have seen this, right? We have seen the notion that perhaps some feminine values becomes maybe better serve the society. And the research have shown that, let's say, CEOs who actually have daughters, this is actually published in one of the Ivy Business Journal, CEOs with daughters are more inclined to adopt corporate responsibility practice because they see the feminine side of things. We see that board with women.
Sorry, this is interesting. So you're saying CEOs that have daughters for some reason are more corporately, more socially oriented?
Yes, there is a study done. Now, bear in mind, there's always a caveat. Study is a study. Can you generalize both? Question mark. But it has shown that CEOs with daughters tend to be more open to corporate responsibility adoption. Yes. I'll find that for you.
Okay. And then you were going to say something about boards.
Yes. And we have seen that research have shown too, board with women tend to be more successful, have longer term performance orientation. And so we are on the, I would say, on the trend of talking about, diversity in management, right? We are encouraging diversity in board for that also reason. It's not because we just want women on board, because we do bring something different, and we do bring the feminine values, which is the kindness, the caring, the community, the support, the teamwork, those kind of values.
So is the male masculine role an old-fashioned part of leadership and management? Well,
I wouldn't say it's old-fashioned. I would say it's balanced. Ultimately, I think for us to prosper and to thrive, we need balance, right? Our ecosystem is balanced. It's not one or the other, but it's balanced. I do find some masculine values are very important because I do embrace, all of us embrace both feminine and masculine values. Masculine values such as achievement is important because if you don't strive to hit a target, you probably won't go as far, right? So that's very important. And sometimes assertiveness is important. But if assertiveness balanced with kindness, you become open to different opinions without, holding on too much of your own thinking, and allow, new things to be emerged. So I think at the end of the day, it's about balance. And I think we went a bit too far to the masculine side in the past. And I think it's time to put it back a little bit. And I think this would be a better way to kind of move companies forward.
And how do we do this? Is this by bringing more females into management or boards, or is it by teaching men some of these value-based leadership beliefs?
I think it's both. No, I think it's both. I think obviously we would like to give opportunities to both genders, and I think that's very important. But it's not just by bringing female, and I think by bringing female into executive and board role, we can definitely balance out the values. And usually when people interact, right, we influence each other. So, the feminine values will get kind of diffused into the culture of the organization and the leadership team, and the atmosphere governing the leadership team. And also that's why I'm focusing on values-based leadership, is because when all men have both values, it's just because you're men doesn't mean you're more masculine than otherwise. The values can be brought up if we encourage people to kind of reflect upon, do you actually care for your family? Do you care about others? Do you care about the environment, or do you care about the bottom line? Many people will say, I care about all these things, but why are certain things become more prominent in the business environment? It's because there has been culturally has been ingrained in that thinking that business is about profits versus everything else.
But isn't business about profits?
It is about profit, but it's not just about profit.
What else is it about? Some people argue about this triple or quadruple
Yes.
bottom line. But then, some studies suggest that people that are overly worried about things other than profit end up being unsuccessful and taken over by hostile takeovers and private equity groups.
Well, a lot of it is about balance. Profit is important because without profits, business can't survive. So the fundamental economics of business is to generate profit in order to reinvest itself. But why is business born in the first place? Why do people come up with the business ideas? Is it all purely because they just want to make money, or actually there is always a purpose? So I'm going to ask a question. When an entrepreneur starts a business, do they just want to say, I'm going to go rich, I'll do whatever it comes? Or is usually there's something that interests them? That think that, I have this idea, I think people will like it, or I have this idea where people will benefit from it. And usually businesses are born that way. Usually businesses are not more born because I just want to find some gold and therefore I would do whatever it takes. Now, some people do that. I wouldn't say no, but a lot of businesses are not started that way. But I really think that because people start to get really immersed into the profit side, they forgot actually why they were there in the first place. But so it's a bit of balance, because business with profits, but not thinking about how to make the community a better place, they are compromising the long-term success, because actually business cannot survive on its own. It needs an ecosystem to support themselves. And so I think it's important to consider not just profits, but everything else that they do in order to be successful for the long term.
I like what you're saying, and I tend to agree with it. But let me challenge you. If you spend too much time worrying about the community and about social issues and other things that aren't necessarily what the company is all about, you're going to have less profit than you otherwise would. And there was this concept.
Why would you say that it has less profit? Okay, I'm going to ask you then a question. Then, why do you think that would turn out to be less profit? If the company focused on the community, why do you think, or customers or employees, why do you think they will have less profit by default?
Well, I think that, there's this concept from several decades ago about sort of agency in management, where management was spending a whole bunch of things on things other than for values of the shareholder. And that led to the whole Michael Jensen shareholder value orientation that led to, private equity, hostile takeovers, et cetera, to rid companies of managers that were oriented toward things other than profit. And as they spent money on, and at that time, most of it was oriented to money on themselves, compensation and inefficiencies, et cetera. They found that companies could be better taken over by private equity that would lever it up and create more incentives for people to maximize profits because they had big interest bills, and the companies end up being more successful. No?
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. Your narrative is correct. But our challenge that is the agency theory. The agency theory actually posits that managers are self-serving. And so agency theory is flawed in the sense that the management, if they are actually self-serving, whatever they do outside of profits, it's not actually maybe not necessarily for the best for the company and the stakeholders. So a new theory emerged that actually strive to actually create a balance that optimize profits while optimize impact. And so that's stewardship theory. So stewardship theory posits that managers' role actually is not self-serving, although people tend to be self-serving, but they are stewards of the organizations where they had the privilege to lead. And that goes with the board as well, board and management. And so their role is to be steward for the stakeholders who have interest in the organization. So that includes shareholders, that include customers, employees, communities, and environment. And so if management taking a different thinking in terms of how they manage versus agency theory, but adopt a stewardship theory, then their role becomes balancing the interest of all of them. And the outcome would be a better company with sustainable profits, because you're not trying to, run down your employees, right? We heard running down employees isn't really a good idea, or scamming your customers isn't really a good idea, or, polluting the environment at the end of the day will cost you anyway. So I think stewardship theory is one that is going to take companies further, and is a better management practice. And I hear you, Brian. A lot of companies, when they don't focus on profit and try to do other things, tend to be takeover because sometimes it's just not because they focus too much on the good thing. Sometimes they are not practicing prudent or management, in a sense that it's not good management. Good management is really to balance the interest of different players well.
We've just come through International Women's Day, and I saw a lot of posts on social media where it wasn't that people were espousing feminine traits the way that you described. It was almost as if people were talking about how masculine traits exhibited by females were okay and shouldn't be seen as overly assertive or naggy, or some of those negative words that sometimes people apply to females that are assertive. And this whole, Sheryl Sandberg lean in kind of mentality, isn't that almost arguing to females that they need to be more assertive and less feminine?
You have a really good point. I don't always 100% agree on some of these, some of the, I would say, posture. I respect in a sense that, yes, maybe women should be leaning in a little bit more, be more assertive. My stance, this is my stance, not representing any other view. I respect everybody else's perspective because we're all different. We should be authentic in a sense that some females tend to be more feminine. Some females tend to have a more masculine disposition. I think we need to embrace what is our strength. And to me, our strength is what is going to take us to the next level, in a sense that our strength is going to make us shine, not trying to be someone else. I understand why Sheryl Sandberg said we should lean in. Sometimes one tends to be a little bit maybe gun shy. And we have, it's a cultural, nuance, right? We have been, a lot of times in the past, women has been seen kind of behind, their better half, we stand behind them, and we are the woman behind a successful man. And so that has been ingrained in our head, and we tend to be shy from stepping forward. And I think it's very well said in the sense that, if we have something to say, just say it. But don't change our personality just because. You know what I'm saying? We need to be there. We need to say what we need to say. But if we are who we are, then we just stay who we are. I don't see a problem. And I would prefer that to be myself versus trying to adopt masculine values in a feminine body. You know what I'm saying?
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Candice Chow, who is a professor at the DeGroote School of Business, McMaster University. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Candice in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Candice Chow, Dr. Candice Chow, who is a professor at the DeGroote School of Business, McMaster University. And she's got some interesting viewpoints on where management and leadership is going to in the future. Dr. Chow, what was your thesis on?
My thesis is on the influence of executives' values on corporate responsibility adoption. And one of the key things that my thesis found is the importance of conviction.
Of what?
Conviction.
Explain conviction.
not conviction as in being convicted for a crime, but conviction as a strong belief.
A strong belief, being committed to something.
Very, very committed to something. So conviction, the definition of conviction is a set of really strong values and beliefs. And when people have a conviction, they tend to have also a strong self-belief in their ability to achieve whatever the goals that conviction is guiding them towards. So that's conviction. Conviction is very powerful. What my research is looking at, why do some people tend to be able to do extraordinary things for business, for themselves, change the world, invent new things? And one of the things I found that when I talk to these people, these are executives, they are not famous people, they are people like us, amongst us. But when they talk about something they really care about, you can see that energy and motivation behind that. And that conviction is usually formed by their experience. So they would tell me stories about, how when they were young, what happened and what the experience were like. Maybe they went through traumas, or they experienced observed challenges, or, things that are not pleasant. And these things kind of get ingrained in their mind. And over time, as they reflect and grow and learn, those experiences shape their personal values. And some values become so strong that guide their mission and purpose in life that turn that into conviction. And I find that conviction becomes a very important motivator if we want to drive or make change in any way in our life.
So, I've always thought that confidence or committed were important traits to have. What
Right.
you're suggesting is conviction is even more powerful because it's, I guess, a stronger. And I'm just looking at the definition of conviction. It's a strong belief or opinion where someone no longer has any doubts, no doubts.
Right. Indeed. Okay, so confidence is obviously something we built over time. Conviction has confidence embedded in it. So I wouldn't say conviction is more important than confidence. But one thing's different. Conviction is different from confidence. Is conviction has values embedded in it, in a sense that these are very strong values. And a characteristic of values is motivation. So if I care about something, let's say when I was young, I saw a tragedy happen in front of me. Maybe somebody get hurt, or there is a massive, catastrophe. And so perhaps these experiences depends on who you are and what you experience afterwards, will shape certain values that become prominent to you. And so these values will motivate me to do something. So let's say, for example, I saw catastrophe, a lot of people getting hurt. And so that shaped my career, become a doctor. And so my values of saving lives becomes my conviction. So I really want to save lives because in my past experience, catastrophe or trauma or whatever, because of those things. Because of those values, it drives goals. So my goals is I want to be a medical doctor that will save lives. And confidence is a requirement for me to be a good doctor. But to be a good doctor, I need that values as a push because it's motivate me to build a goal that becomes my life mission.
Really, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that conviction is you've got to have confidence, but you've got to have something more. You've got to have this belief in what you're doing is right, this values that then takes the confidence further, that gives you conviction.
Yes, because confidence without context is just confidence, right? You only exert confidence because there's a contextual situation for you to exert. When you have a purpose that's driven by values, then your confidence has a place. One thing though, conviction builds confidence too. So let's say if I see something that's troubling and the values start to come to me and say, this is very important. I can't stand seeing, lives are lost or people get hurt. Those negative feelings shape my values and also build my confidence, because when I feel that the situation that I see in front of me is so bothersome that I want to do something about it, the want to do something about it also gives me the courage. And, as you know, courage, confidence goes hand in hand as well. And with courage, I start to build confidence. And confidence will build up once you take the step forward to actually do something based on your conviction, and you are successful or people help you, then your confidence also grows. It's actually relational. So one reinforces the other.
Okay, so maybe I'm questioning whatever the word is, but what's the difference between courage, confidence, and conviction?
Okay, so conviction is a broader construct. So conviction is amalgamation of values and self-efficacy that has confidence embedded in it. So when someone has a conviction, means I will do whatever it takes to achieve my goal. Otherwise, if you say I have a goal, but I could give up tomorrow, that's not a conviction. Okay. So when someone has a goal and they are really working, towards that goal, and that's a conviction, and you need to have the belief that you can do it, whether it's today or tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So when you have that self-efficacy belief, you by default have a related characteristic, which is courage and confidence. Because without courage, you won't move forward with your goal. Without confidence, your ability to achieve that goal will be compromised. And so embedded in conviction, in the characteristic of the notion or the concept of conviction, is courage and confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's there's a phrase, something like, if you have the courage of your convictions, you'll have the confidence to do what is right.
Oh, they're all related.
But it's as if conviction, as you say, is this overriding issue. So how does one find out what their conviction is?
It's a life exploration. You're not born to know, right? So conviction is formed through time, through experience, and through reflexivity. Some people may or may not find a conviction, but if you want to have a purpose in your professional life or your personal life, then with careful reflections of what happened in your life, what you observe in front of you, you can cultivate conviction. You can find conviction. You can find the courage. You can find the confidence. And to build
lots of people say you need to find your passion.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that that finding what your conviction is different than what your passion is?
Conviction and passion are related, but not the same. Passion is just what I like to do. I like to play the piano. That's my passion. In the context of my research, conviction is bigger than a passion. Conviction has the ability to change the world. Passion is usually for what you like to do as a person. So the conviction is more than just something I like doing. Conviction has to do with values. It could be social values. It could be ecological values. It could be moral values, something that have a value orientation, human values orientation to it, that when you see that the world is not really living up to it, and it really bothers you, you would jump and really do something about it. A lot of heroes and leaders have that ability. That is when they can do something bigger than themselves. Passion is a little bit more about myself. I like to, pursue a certain interest. I'll pursue it. doesn't mean I'm going to change the world. So that's a bit of a difference between the two.
So this is interesting because there's this concept, which I think is a Japanese cultural concept of Ikigai, which is the intersection of 4 questions. One is what do you like to do, which is, as you've described, maybe your passion. Another one, which is what are you good at, which might be your vocation. Another is what can you get paid for, which might be your profession. And the final is what does the world need more of?
Yeah.
And the world needs more of maybe value oriented, or maybe just be sort of blue ocean oriented, that there's a need. What you're saying is that Japanese concept of Ikigai, which is the intersection of those 4 questions, needs another question on top of it in regards to what are your values?
I don't know. I don't want to kind of put another layer, because when people start to layer things, it gets overly complicated in my mind. And I agree with those kind of steps, because it makes sense. So as you mature, the ultimate question is what does the world need more of? The thing is, I like the essence of values, because everyone is different, right? So the world needs a ton of different things of, right? We can see opportunities everywhere. We can definitely change out everything, from healthcare to how financing is being done, to education, to whatnot, right? So, but where do we fit ourselves into what the world needs more of? And I like how you say the world need more of. And the values is, if I have my unique set of values, and maybe different than yours, Brian. Right? I'd love to be in the education sector, and you love to be in the capital market sector. That's kind of your passion. My values, I want to change how the next generation is going to be educated. I believe there's something there. That's my conviction. And so I'm going to put that into, and I'm going to answer the 4th question that you asked. The word need more of. For me, is educator. For you, will be something different. And so values to me is what distinguish one person to another, for them to find something that is meaningful.
So if you're talking to your students, how do you tell them to think this through?
This is a good question. Actually, a very timely one. I just designed a new program, a new course. It's going to be launched this summer, and it's for the end course for a part-time MBA program at the Grid. And what I was doing in this course is exactly that, is to help them find their values. And if they become convictions, great. If they don't, at least they understand what they are, in terms of what they embrace, in terms of embody, in terms of their value priorities and principles. There is actually value tool available that I'm working with a scholar in UK. So this value tool will allow you to identify what kind of values that you embrace. And so there's a bunch of questions, and you do that. And in this course, I asked the students to do those assessments and reflect on, are those values that, you after the assessment and telling you these are your values, what do you think about them? And I'm going to ask them to kind of create their own personal reflection plan. So I asked them to do 2 things. One is, I now want you to think about kind of what is your purpose post MBAs. And then I'm going to ask you, what have you learned through your MBAs? And not just about what you learned technically, marketing, finance, and operations, but also ask them, what have you learned from a leadership perspective, and how you work as a person? So I want to think deeply about themselves as individuals, beyond all the technical jargons they learned from business school. And then I'm going to ask them, what do you want to achieve in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And through this process, I want them to start thinking about what are their values. And if these values are what they are, how are those values informing their future development plan? And so this is one part of what the program that I'm actually doing this summer is going to do, plus a bunch of other very interesting things.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Candice Chow, who is a professor at McMaster University at the DeGroote School of Business, about value-based management and conviction. Kind of interesting. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, we're back with Dr. Candice Chow from DeGroote School of Business, McMaster University. And she's just been talking about a new program that a new course that she's been instituting at DeGroote about trying to figure out what your purpose is. And Candice, I got to tell you, I met this really interesting person who said that, going around at a cocktail party or a dinner party and asking people what they do is completely the wrong thing, because it all focuses on how we're making money. And this person said that the right question to ask people is, what is your legacy?
That would be an interesting question at the cocktail party, because that question will stump people.
So Dr. Chow, what is your legacy?
I have this grandiose vision in my head, and that I would like to rechange how management education is being done in the future. I find that the management education, any education in general, tends to be too theoretical and too technical and too boxed into a classroom. And I foresee the future of education is going to be very, very different for people coming out of high school. And this is something that it's very important to me that I would like to see change in the future. I find that management education tends to focus more on theories and not enough applications and practicalities, and not enough in terms of how to let people work together. And I find the interactions and relational activities are super important to enhance people's thinking and to allow them to find actually themselves. And so I feel that tomorrow's and the future education for at least for undergrad is, for the third and fourth year, it will be vocational. So I believe in a mentorship model of or apprenticeship model of education. And to me, that's what I'd like to leave a legacy, is to rethink how education is being done. Instead of doing it in the classroom, after you've done all the basic knowledge, you go out and work with people, and through apprenticeship and ongoing education is where you're going to develop your expertise. And it really, through real world, hands-on working, do you actually find, to me, your values and purpose is because through interactions and failures and success as well.
So it's interesting, this person, when they said this question about asking people about what their legacy is, told me that the benefit of that was, I guess, and I wasn't using the word conviction, but thinking about what your purpose is sort of forward looking. It's what you would like your purpose to be. But legacy, the way you described it, is leave a legacy. It's what people remember about you when you're gone. What is your legacy? And they actually said, and this is interesting relative to your comment about you can do a test based on your UK association about your values. They said the best way to figure out what your legacy is, or what you want your legacy to be, is to write your eulogy.
Yep.
And when you write your eulogy, or at least what you would like your eulogy to be, and or write what your eulogy would be today versus what you would like your eulogy to be, you know what you've got to do to achieve your legacy.
Absolutely. We did that at business school. Did you do that at business school? We had to do that in business school. We had to write our own eulogy.
Write your own eulogy?
Yes. And I can't remember what I wrote.
But it is an interesting way for you to figure out what your legacy is and what you've got to be, what you got to have as your conviction and your purpose.
No, and there's another way of people doing that. So the eulogy is a way. Another way is to kind of imagine yourself as a future self coming back and tell yourself and meeting yourself. It's almost like you're doing a visualization exercise where you start to kind of visualize what you're going to look like, let's say 30, 40 years later on, and imagine that scenario and have that person come back and talk to you. And that is also a different way to kind of give yourself some idea in terms of what kind of a legacy you are going to leave.
Awesome. Dr. Chow, I also understand that you are a part of an organization called HU, which is women helping empower women or something like that.
Yes. I'm very fortunate to be a board member in that. This is a phenomenal organization with a bunch of exceptional female leaders. We are here to share our knowledge insights with other female, whether they are younger students, graduates, or working females, in terms of empowering each other to be the better version of ourselves. And there is an event coming up on April 7th.
And if people want to check out Women Helping Empower Women, how do they do that? Is there a website?
Yes, there is a website. It's whew.com, and there's an event coming up. Sign up, and the event is going to be quite great. It's going to be about how to start up your own business. Global.
Fantastic. Dr. Candice Chow, DeGroote School of Business, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us value-based management and the importance of knowing what your conviction is.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
My honor and my pleasure. Thank you. Well, that's our show for tonight. Brian Crombie Radio Hour comes to you every night, Monday through Friday at 7 o'clock on 960 AM, or you can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and video casts after the fact at briancrombie.com, on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, or even Spotify. Thanks for joining me. Good night.